I'm Maddie, 36 years old. I used to think staying useful would mean staying included. Things tend to run more smoothly when I'm not there. The wood-panelled sign behind my desk hung slightly off-centre. The brass letters still had a scratch on the corner from the winter. A luggage cart tipped and hit it. Ballroom A. Private event. 4:45 p.m. Just beneath in smaller serif font, Whittaker family reunion. The spelling was precise, no missing letters, no mention of mine. I adjusted the collar of my pale blue linen shirt. The fabric had wrinkled at the neckline from wearing it since dawn. No one would see it, but I did it anyway. Just like always. Owen had placed the printed event schedule on my desk at 8:05. No post-it note. No explanation. Just a folded A4 sheet light enough to shift with the draft from the ceiling fan. I didn't open it right away. Beside it sat my ceramic mug, the one with the tiny chip near the rim. A faint ring of cooled tea had settled around the base, like the echo of someone who'd left quietly without closing the door behind them. At 9:20, I opened the event system's internal confirmation log. Request submitted by Samantha Whittaker. My cousin. Same blood, different branch. She once slipped a peppermint into my palm when I forgot the words to a school speech at 12. Now she was requesting crystal stemware ivory napkins and had added a note. Please ensure everything reflects the Hawthorne family's traditional values. The request came through our corporate channel. No one had connected her to me. She didn't know the CE and CE Hawthorne Holdings stood for the girl who once cleaned rooms down the hall and now approved her flower arrangements. I didn't correct her. There's a framed name tag on the back shelf of my office. Black plastic slightly cracked. Maddie. Housekeeping. Vermont. 2014. I hadn't looked at it in months, but today I noticed the dust line where it sat. Later, I typed a single message to Aunt Lorraine. No greeting. If you're going arrive at 6:40, don't let them wander in early. It matters. The message was marked read. No reply. That was enough. I didn't leave all at once. I stepped back one polite silence at a time. The first week at Corbin and Hawthorne, I wore the same navy blazer every day. It had a loose thread near the inner pocket that I never cut. I kept running my thumb across it in meetings like a stitch I could still hold on to. They had already printed my name on the office door before I arrived. Madeline G. Hawthorne, Strategy Associate. The G stood for Grace, though no one ever used it. My cubicle faced a frosted glass partition, just opaque enough that I couldn't see who passed by, but could always hear their shoes. 3 months in, I brought up the pension freeze during a quarterly review. The report had been buried in a footnote tucked beneath numbers that rose too neatly. My father looked up from his papers. You think this firm runs on feelings? Then the pause. You want to carry luggage for a living? I didn't answer. I just folded the page and tucked it back into the binder. A week later, I submitted my withdrawal from the firm and dropped off my badge in an envelope without my name on it. That year, I applied to Cornell's hotel school and got in. No one asked how it went. I sent a scarf to Eleanor for her birthday. Pale grey silk blend. She posted a photo of the box, untagged, no caption. I stood in Harper's wedding photo, 3rd row, left side. A waiter in white passed in front of me just as the flash went off. In the print that made the family wall, my face was half obscured by his elbow. 2 days after the wedding, a screenshot circled back to me from someone who hadn't meant to forward it. My name badge, cracked, tilted, captioned, "She always wanted to scrub floors. Guess dreams come true." No one removed it. No one replied. Not, I reread that message once then, pressed and held to delete. The phone buzzed once in protest, like even the screen thought I should look again. That was the year I stopped sending holiday texts. It's strange how trying can look like nothing when no one wants to see it. Some absences are quieter than silence. They happen where names used to be. I kept the magazine folded in thirds, tucked between the pages of a furniture catalogue I never threw out. The feature article ran 3 pages photos of the renovated in quotes about guest retention, a small paragraph about how the property had once been a collapsing barn. The byline used my initials. No one in my family shared it, not even a mention in passing. I found out Samantha had posted an interview from that same issue, different story, different face, a chef who once catered one of her events. Her caption read, "Love seeing people grow from the ground up." That December, the Hawthorne holiday card arrived. Glossy paper red foil trim, a pine cone illustration in the corner. Douglas, Eleanor, Caleb, Samantha, Toby. No comma left hanging, no room for revision. On the mantel, the same porcelain angel figurines we'd used for years stood in their usual places. I wasn't there to see them in person, but the photo was uploaded to the family site. My name wasn't mentioned in the caption. I looked for it anyway. At Toby's birthday dinner, I brought a bottle of wine that matched the menu. He didn't look at it. Eleanor passed a slice of cake to him and patted his shoulder. "You've done this family proud." Then a pause. Her eyes skimmed across the table. "There's something in how you carry yourself. It's fitting." I watched her cut another slice, this one smaller. She placed it on a plain white plate and passed it my way without comment. The frosting smudged along the edge like it had been touched and wiped away. I never blamed her. It was easier to think maybe I hadn't been clear enough. Maybe I'd made it difficult to see me. Maybe I never fit the frame they'd already chosen. When I was 8, someone took a picture of me on the back porch, holding a glass pitcher with both hands. The lemonade sloshed too close to the rim, and my father's hand steadied the side. It was one of the few times his hand ever rested there on my shoulder. His cufflink had caught the light just as the shutter clicked. That photograph stayed in a drawer at my aunt's house under a stack of old cookbooks and warranty receipts. The corner had curled, and the ink bled slightly along the edge of my hair. I remembered it because no one looked posed. No one seemed to know the camera was there. And maybe that's why I knew I hadn't disappeared yet. Erasure doesn't need a loud gesture. It only needs repetition. The hallway smelled faintly of varnish and dry wood. A new coat had been applied over the break. The brass sconces were polished brighter than I remembered, and the chairs at the entrance had been reupholstered in a deeper green. The heritage wall was the same height, same shape, same symmetry. 2 columns of names etched into walnut panels, framed with narrow moulding. Under each heading the words, "Legacy Contributors," had been embossed in gold leaf. I traced the familiar order from the top. One name had been added, Tobias Hawthorne, Managing Partner H Capital, and one had been removed. The spacing gave it away. The distance between Samantha and Caleb used to be tighter. There was now a gap where my name had been smoothed over, sanded, re-stained. Not a scratch left. It looked as if I'd never existed in that spot to begin with. I held my phone lower than usual when I took the photo. The reflection of the wall was clearer that way without my outline shadowing it. I didn't plan to send it anywhere. It just didn't feel right to walk away empty-handed. A printed newsletter had been slipped under my office door earlier that week. Samantha's quarterly digest for the family trust. Page 2 featured a glossy article titled, "Foundations Forward Honoring Our Financial Roots." The event invitation had a gold embossed border and a slogan, "Every Hawthorne, every generation." My name didn't appear. I turned to the last page, a closing quote in bold italics. My father's voice. "We've raised a family of financial visionaries. There's not a single one of us who chose less." Owen paused when he saw the newsletter on my desk. His fingers grazed the edge before he spoke. "You want to make this public?" I folded the page back in half. They already did. He didn't press. The stapler next to the in tray clicked once as he adjusted its alignment. It was a small sound, but it landed clean like the punctuation to a sentence I never got to say. Later, I stood again in front of the wooden wall and let my hand hover just above the space that used to hold my name. Not touching, just knowing where it was. The panel was warm from the sun that came in through the tall windows behind me. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel misplaced. I felt edited. And I suppose there's a difference between forgetting and choosing not to look. Sometimes leaving doesn't feel like walking away, it feels like no longer holding on. The group chat icon blinked once on my screen, then went still. A photo of Toby in front of a podium captioned with a single word. Next. I tapped to view, then held my thumb at the corner until the delete option appeared. One motion. No noise. Nothing asked me to confirm. The folder on my desktop labeled Family. Archive was already sparse. Inside a subfolder of scanned cards, receipts for gifts I never got a thank you for, and screenshots I didn't mean to keep. I compressed it into a zip file, renamed it Closed Zip, and dragged it to a flash drive. The icon disappeared. I didn't look back. Owen stopped by with the floral contract for an upcoming charity gala. He placed it gently on the edge of my desk. The second page listed Whitaker Hawthorne Legacy Group under partners. His pen circled it once. "You want me to redirect?" I handed him the staff protocol binder. No notes, just a small paper tab where my name used to be. He nodded. That afternoon, I unscrewed the nameplate from the edge of my desk. The brass had dulled at the corners, but the engraving was still sharp. I placed it inside a drawer lined with felt next to a single white envelope addressed to no one. Empty. Lorraine's number was still pinned at the top of my phone. I opened the message window, typed 3 words, then erased them one by one. Her name remained quietly unread. In the back of my notebook, I wrote a single line. Silence isn't surrender. It's when the explanation no longer belongs to you. I passed by the shelf where the old housekeeping badge used to rest. The outline left behind on the wood was a shade lighter, like a faint sunprint. I lifted it gently and placed it into the drawer beside the nameplate. Not hidden, just no longer displayed. The air in the room shifted slightly as I closed the drawer. The hinge let out a small groan, the kind that only comes from being opened too often for reasons that never needed words. No one noticed when I stopped sending cards. No one asked why I didn't show up. And I didn't correct the silence because what they never said had already answered more than I ever needed. Starting over doesn't feel new, it feels quieter than staying. The ceiling of the attic room sloped sharply to the left, low enough that I had to duck to open the far cabinet. A single window faced the trees. No curtains, just wooden trim painted once, maybe twice, and left to fade unevenly. The glass had a faint scratch near the latch, shaped like a crescent moon. I kept a notepad beside the bed, the kind with perforated edges and a faint blue grid. Every morning I wrote down the same 3 things: the temperature of the room, the number of guests checked in, and anything that didn't sound right in the heating pipes. The ink bled slightly on the paper. It always did in colder rooms. On the shelf above the desk, I found an old guest book from the early days. The corners curled inward, and the spine creaked when opened. The first name written was in thick rounded script. Darla S. Room 2. Best night of sleep I've had in years. I remembered her. She arrived after midnight with 2 mismatched suitcases and never asked for help. There was a phrase I used to print on every welcome card. You're here now. You can rest. I read it again in my own handwriting, slightly crooked, printed on linen paper I used to cut shots by hand. I placed one of the cards on the nightstand. No guest would see it this time, but the words still fit the room. The mug on the windowsill had a hairline crack near the base. The glaze had worn away where fingers used to grip the handle. I still used it. It wasn't chipped enough to cut, just enough to remember it wasn't whole. Mid-morning, I swept the front porch. 3 leaves caught in the corner rail. One of them had a hole through the center perfectly round. I left it there. No calls. No messages. No alerts that asked where I'd gone or why I hadn't returned. The silence was clean. Not cold. Just enough. I reread an old invoice from the first month of business. The logo was faded, the formatting inconsistent. I hadn't known which font to choose back then, so I picked one at random, plain, almost awkward. I kept it. The chair by the window creaked when I shifted my weight. The cushion had a loose thread at the seam. I didn't fix it, because this wasn't a place to look perfect. It was a place that didn't ask me to be anything at all. When people come back for what you own, not who you are, it sounds like memory, but feels like strategy. The subject line read, Request, Legacy Banquet, June. The sender address belonged to Samantha, though it was routed through her husband's firm. The message was brief, 2 paragraphs, 4 bullet points split. At the bottom she signed Samantha Whittaker on behalf of the Hawthorne family estate. The word estate had been bolded. They wanted the Eastern ballroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows, private valet upgraded menu tier. We're expecting press coverage, she wrote. Family legacy must be reflected in atmosphere. No greeting, no signature block that acknowledged who owned the venue, only a postscript. We trust the hotel's leadership will understand the name Hawthorne carries weight. There was a photo attached, a rendering of their proposal for the invitation suite. Gold serif font over a faded image of the original Haven Lodge. My first property. A caption placed cleanly in the corner, reimagined by generations of Hawthorne vision. No mention of the name that signed the deed. Owen printed the proposal and placed it on my desk in silence. The edge of the page had folded slightly during printing, creating a ripple in the paper that caught the light. They think you're gone. I didn't correct him. The next morning I replied with a single line. Please submit all requests through the appropriate commercial channel. C.E. Hawthorne Holdings does not serve as representative of any private family. No punctuation. No closing. I watched the cursor blink for a moment before pressing send. The screen made a soft sound. Not a chime, more like an acknowledgement. The kind that marks completion, not connection. Later, I skimmed the layout for their event. Every detail followed the brand guidelines I'd written 3 years ago. The linen colours, the flatware style, the wall sconces. My signature was in all of it. Just not in ink. They didn't come back for me. They came back for the building. And they assumed I'd let them in again just because the key still worked. But some doors only open when someone's name is still written on the other side, and mine was no longer there. You can grow roots in quiet places and still be real. The attic apartment had a slanted ceiling that hummed slightly in wind. plants lined the windowsill in mismatched ceramic pots, one chipped at the base, one too small for the growing roots inside. I never repotted them. They grew anyway. I no longer wore foundation. The mirror in the hallway showed less definition than it used to softer edges but steadier hands. I still brushed my hair in the mornings, but left it loose. There was no schedule telling me how I should look, and no faces waiting to approve it. The kitchen shelf held 3 mugs, none of them matching. I reached for the one with a faded blue line along the rim. It had belonged to the front desk of our first property. I kept it because the handle curved imperfectly too close to the body, like it had been pulled inward before it was ready. Each morning I boiled water in the old stove-top kettle. Not electric. No timer. Just the slow rise of steam. I liked how it made me wait. While it warmed, I flipped through the local paper. Printed. Folded. Slightly off-center. Chloe had moved into management a few weeks earlier. Her name tag had been updated in the directory, same font, same format, but now next to it, a new title, Lodge Director. I watched her lead a morning staff meeting from the stairwell, one hand resting lightly on a clipboard. She didn't notice me, and I didn't interrupt. The thank you notes I wrote to returning guests now lived in a drawer by the front desk. Handwritten. Short. The ink sometimes smudged on the edges, especially if I wrote them too soon after washing my hands. I stopped trying to fix it. No one at the hotels called me Miss Hawthorne anymore. Just Maddie. No title, no pause. And it fit. One afternoon I opened a small cedar box I hadn't touched in years. Inside 4 photographs, a ribbon, 2 ticket stubs, and a letter from Lorraine in blue ink. I pulled out the photo of us from a picnic, her arm around my shoulder, a paper plate in my lap. No one else in the frame. I pinned it above the desk, not at eye level, but slightly below. No glass, no gold trim, just paper and pushpin. It didn't need to be displayed. It only needed to be seen. You can only be erased so many times before you pick up the pen yourself. The envelope from the foundation came printed on textured stock, heavier than necessary. My name appeared in serif font along the top, next to an outdated address I hadn't lived at in 4 years. Inside, the trusty update listed new beneficiaries, adjusted allocations, and a signature line next to mine, pre-filled waiting. I marked through my name once clean and straight. Not angry, not bold. Just final. In the margin I wrote 3 words in block print, does not apply. I folded the document twice, not neatly, and slipped it back into the return envelope. The genealogy record came in a separate package wrapped in tissue. The book had a hardbound cover navy with gold detailing along the spine. I flipped to page 34. There I was, middle child, Cornell graduate, undocumented contributions in hospitality. No dates, no mention of ownership. Just a placeholder, a line to prove I'd once been attached. I drew a single horizontal slash through the entry. Beneath it, I signed M. Grace then closed the book and bound it with twine. There was no anger in the knot, just precision. To Samantha, I sent a manila envelope. No return name. Inside a printed copy of the Haven Easton contract. Event, Whittaker Hawthorne, Legacy Banquet. Client, Samantha, Whittaker. Signatory C.E. Hawthorne. Taped to the front page was a torn scrap of hotel stationery. I wrote in pencil, the only time I was invited. You didn't know it was me. I placed the envelope in the outgoing mail bin at reception. No tracking, no signature required. Later, I opened the HR system and submitted a name change request. The drop-down list asked for a reason. I left it blank. Maddie Hawthorne. M. Grace. The final thing I did that day wasn't dramatic. I stepped into the staff locker room during a maintenance check. On the third hook from the left, a silver tag still hung Maddie. Housekeeping, Eastern Branch. I lifted it from the nail, smoothed the lanyard flat, and placed it into a small tin box lined with felt. The lid clicked closed with a soft snap. No label, no ceremony. I didn't bury it. I didn't display it. I just gave it a place where it no longer had to prove anything. Peace doesn't arrive with a sound, it settles into the space you no longer fill with proving. The kettle sang before I remembered to turn the flame low. I poured the water carefully into a cup with a jagged rim, the kind of flaw most people toss without thought. I kept it because it had survived 3 moves and 2 winters. It had chipped in the Vermont cabin on a night I didn't speak to anyone. The mint leaves on the windowsill curled toward the light. I pinched the yellowing tips and turned the pot slightly. The curtain above them hung uneven, so I adjusted the hem by folding it under with a clothespin. The pin was from a laundry bag someone left years ago. I'd kept it out of habit. On the kitchen table, Chloe's note sat unfolded. The handwriting leaned left. She always pressed too hard on downstrokes. The last line read, "You saw me before I did." The paper was warm where the sun had hit it. I didn't move it. I buttered half a slice of toast and left the knife unwashed on the plate. No one would come to judge the crumbs or the quiet. There were no meetings scheduled, no press releases to review, just the sound of wood settling under its own weight. I glanced once toward the cabinet above the fridge. The tin box remained there, tucked behind a jar of loose tea. I didn't open it. I hadn't, in months. But I liked knowing it was still there, sealed untouched, honest. No one from the family had written again. Not Eleanor, not Caleb, not Samantha. I didn't wonder why. There were no apologies, and none had been requested. I thought of the table they sat at last spring, full of silverware and silence. I couldn't remember what flowers they used, only that they didn't know who owned the room. I carried a leather notebook onto the porch and sat facing the yard. The cover hadn't been written in. No plans, no outlines, just pages waiting. The breeze shifted slightly, pulling a strand of hair across my cheek. I didn't fix it. I let the tea cool in my hands, resting between sips. Nothing around me changed. Not the trees, not the sky, not the sound of distant traffic. But I looked up anyway. The color wasn't different than yesterday. I simply noticed it for the first time.